Hello there!
Petscop 2 starts off where the previous video left off, with the door opening by itself accompanied by some beeping sounds. Paul tells us he did not witness the door opening as he was in the other room when it happened. The beeping sounds seem to be notes, but performing a frequency analysis reveals that the interval of the sounds do not conform to semitones, but quarter tones, which is a much less common interval for music. I am unsure of the meaning of the beeping sounds at this time, but they do appear again later on in the series, so I believe that we will be able to explain their significance at a later time, maybe in a currently unreleased episode. There are some questions that come up with this opening scene, such as how long has Paul been looking? How long did he keep on the console, as in the last episode he said he didn't want to turn it off? There's a few weeks between the upload dates of the first and second video. Are the videos uploaded shortly after when Paul plays their respective sections? Or has it only been minutes since the last episode? And has this second video only been uploaded at a later date? Paul enters the door and a black loading screen is displayed. But similar to the previous loading screen, when exiting Even Care, a hidden image can be found when adjusting the brightness. It seems to be a room of some sort, with a bed, what appears to be a TV, a bookcase and a square. Top-notch commentary. Paul emerges in some sort of basement. There are some framed images on the right wall. They are hard to make out, but one of them looks like a wheel or a clock, symbols that will be a recurring theme in the Petscop series. There is some kind of machine next to the staircase, but it's hard to make out what it is exactly. Paul continues to the left and he finds a ringing phone. When he answers the phone, the person on the other side says, "Care left the room," with Care having a yellow gradient indicating a character like we've seen before. The bulletin board on the right has a piece of paper with a character in 3 different states. A normal face, A, one looking a bit worse, B, and a third one, covering her face in agony, NLM. Is this child Care, who the person on the phone mentioned? Paul seems confused and slightly uncomfortable as he continues to the left area. This hallway has 3 images on the walls. One of a greenhouse, one of a building, which also plays an ominous sound when interacted with, and a windmill. A small detail to note for this image is that the windmill blades are mirrored for how windmills usually turn. We then come across a road, where 2 cars come speeding by. Paul tries to explore where the road leads, but he is unsuccessful, only acquiring some collectibles in this area. He then goes through the passage to the next room. Similar to the loading screens before, the loading screen between these areas also has a hidden image that can be seen when the brightness is increased. The image seems to be of a stairway going down, with some light emanating from the right side. There also seems to be an unidentifiable object at the bottom of the stairs, possibly a doorway. Could these be the stairs mentioned in the note in the first episode, turning the person who wrote it into a shadow monster man? Now let's take a moment to reflect on how we got to this area of the game. Remember how we got here? That all of this is supposedly underground? How does that make sense? The sound of Paul's footsteps have an echo to them, giving the impression of a large room or a cave. But then what are these paintings doing here? And this road? To me, the layout of this area reminds me of how your dreams, or I guess nightmares in this case, can sequence seemingly unrelated events and locations after each other in a way that only makes sense when you're asleep, but completely falls apart when you wake up. Paul explores the field and finds a gravestone with a face on it, and a gift sticking out above it. The theme of gifts seems to be a recurring motif in Petscop. We previously saw gifts during the loading screen and on the poles in the gift plane. The gravestone reads, Michael Hammond, 1988 to 1995. Mike was a gift. Paul then performs complex mathematics and gives us an in-depth analysis of what this means by stating the following.
That's a dead kid. Yep.
These words have become a meme in the Petscop community, so now you know a little in-joke that you can comment on your favorite video. Moving on, Paul enters the shed next to the gravestone where a big flower is growing out of the hole in the ground. Each time Paul interacts with the flower, a petal is removed and the flower sinks in the ground, accompanied by a sound. Every other petal makes the sound shift in pitch slightly, and the screen gains a reddish overlay. Before Paul finishes pulling out all of the petals, he stops and enters the adjacent room. Here he finds the girl from the note from before, in her NLM form, on her knees, covering her face and crying in agony. The style of her sprite makes her look interactable, similar to how foreground and background elements are distinguishable in old cartoons. And in fact her style is the same as the style of the pets in Even Care. Is the girl regarded as a pet in this game? Paul cannot reach her as she is on an elevated platform, so he goes back to the flower in the other room and pulls off the remaining petals. The last petal is pulled off, with the screen turning in a red tint. When Paul returns to the other room, the same red tint can be seen across the screen. The platform is lowered, but the girl is heavily distorted and glitching out. Paul is unable to interact with her and he leaves the room. He also gives us his thoughts on this part of the game, sounding almost annoyed.
So when I first came down here, I thought I was just gonna see, like, one room. Like something, but not this.
And his reasoning makes sense. The only way to get to this underground area was by putting in a cheat code all the way back in Ronan's room. Why would such a large portion of the game be locked behind a code that is never hinted at in the game itself? It seems a bit much for this much hidden content to be hidden in a game while being so obscurely accessible. Although then again, there's the Reggie puzzle in the Pokemon games. How am I supposed to find this specific patch of the water in the currents? Go down here, figure out that this is Braille, translate it, and figure out what this cryptic message means as a 12-year-old who learned the mechanics to catch the legendary beast in Gen 2 annoying enough, Game Freak? Okay, back to the video. One small detail to note here is that the feet of Paul's avatar disappear behind an invisible object for a short while. Paul then finds a passage next to the shed and he finds a building. He walks past the window, but instead of entering immediately, he goes back and stands in front of the window for a while. Now, nothing in Petscop is accidental, and indeed, if we turn up the brightness, we can see an animation happening in the window. I'd like to think that Paul was able to notice this on his television, so he moved closer to the screen in order to try and make out what the motion was before continuing, hence the 5-second pause. On the inside, the walls seem to be covered with children's drawings. Some of them have writing on them, but even with post-editing, I can't make out what they say. Paul then comes across a statue of some sort. Its shape is similar to the drawings on the wall, but the object is red, while the drawings were blue. Paul interacts with the statue, and it brings up a text box where he can input a question. Paul asks, "What?" and the statue replies with, "I don't know." Paul continues to the back of the room, where a large screen is partly visible. Interacting with it shows the entire image, and we see a windmill. One thing to note here is that the blades are turning the wrong way. The blades of windmills always turn in the direction of the poles, and here that isn't the case. Later on this will have some more significance. The blades of this windmill are also mirrored from the ones we saw in the picture. I'm not sure if there's a specific reason for this, or it's just another detail that the creators of the series have added to increase the mystery of the game. Now you may think I'm reading into these kinds of details too much, but think about it from a creator perspective. The developers of Petscop had to create the windmill asset and then purposefully mirror it in order to achieve this detail. Even if it's just thrown in as an inconsequential detail, it is another example of how dense the creators of Petscop were able to pack the series. When Paul moves away from the screen, the statue tells him to keep watching the windmill. So he goes back to watching the screen, and two deep, ominous tones can be heard this time.
Oh.
Paul cuts away, says 2 minutes have elapsed and nothing else has happened, so he continues. He states,
There's already been stuff that I could dig a little deeper into, and I'm gonna do that.
I'm not sure what he means by this. It could just be him expressing some thought on how to continue in the game, or something could have happened outside of the game in the 2 minutes that were cut. He continues by addressing his friend directly. He expresses his hope to explore the game together once his friend returns home, which he or she is apparently reluctant to do. On the other side of the passage, there are 2 more areas, but the left one is sealed off. The right one leads to a bedroom. There's text on the floor reading, "Quitter's room." but it's mirrored. Paul approaches the left side of the room, and a character appears that seems to be mirroring Paul's movements. The right character has the same body as Paul, but it has a crudely drawn head of a girl. Remember the image hidden in the loading screen of the first video? This appears to be the face of what was staring at us when Paul left Evencare. And not only that, the layout of the room, on the non-mirrored side, is the same as the loading screen when Paul entered the hatch leading to the underground section. So far it seems that this loading screen shows a glimpse into future sections of the game, in which case we should come across the stairway leading down somewhere in the future, possibly as referenced by the note Paul found with the game, where this unnamed person turned the right and became a shadow monster man. When Paul walks behind the bookcase, the same notes play as when the door to this underground section opened at the start of the video. And we can see that the girl in the mirror is no longer following Paul's movements as a mirror image, but seemingly with a delay. However, upon closer inspection, when offsetting the footage, we can see that she isn't just delayed in her movement, but her movements are in fact distinct, as if she has gained a will of her own, but she quickly returns to following Paul's movements exactly, after Paul stops moving. There is something about this scene that makes you feel very uncomfortable, as if the girl is trying to deceive you into thinking she doesn't actually have a mind of her own. The very subtle, almost unnoticeable deviation from Paul's movement, combined with the lack of ominous music in the scene, enforce this uncomfortable feeling. Music and sound design, in all kinds of media, gives your brain a frame of reference as to how to feel in a certain situation. A blatant example of this is a laugh track in sitcoms, slapping you in the face with the message that the thing you saw just now was funny, even if it wasn't.
Did you see that?
In the case of Petscop, the lack of music causes you to lack support in how to feel, which reinforces the uncomfortable feeling you get more than music would do. Paul seems to feel the same way, and he tries to recreate the event, without success. The footage then cuts, and Paul explains that he took a look at the video footage of the event and asked his friend to comment on the way the reflection was moving. There's also a message in the room. The question, "Do you remember being born?" is written on it, but it's mirrored, as we are on the reverse side of the pair of rooms. The handwriting of this note is the same as the messages given by the statue in the room with the projection of the windmill. Maybe the same person wrote this message as the one who talked to Paul through the statue. Paul leaves the room and continues to the right, where he finds a staircase leading up to the same field as the video started on. The loading screen to this area seems to be of this same field. Paul seems annoyed to be back in this area, which would make sense since the last time he was unable to find anything on this field after wandering aimlessly for a long time. So with that, Paul stops the recording. Petscop 2 does an amazing job of taking the atmosphere of the first video and almost literally taking us down the rabbit hole. The video gives us a setting for future episodes. We only get clues, but little to no answers. But the video is still able to keep your attention by referencing earlier events and clues both from this and previous episode. You are constantly trying to make sense of what's going on, but the feeling you get is that the answers are there, they're just slightly out of reach. Let's hope that Paul will be able to make some progress soon, so we can continue investigating this strange situation.